As we walk the path of exploring spirituality, you have probably heard of the phrase "we are all connected," or "we are co-creating our reality," but have you ever wondered what it really means? In this video, we're going to learn about how are we all connected, through what and in what sense? What role do we play in the grand scheme of this internet connection? Let's get started. First and foremost, saying we are all connected is not just to make us feel good about ourselves. It's a spiritual awakening that could potentially change how we live our lives for the better, once we truly understand its meaning and implications. Before we explore our interconnection, let's try to understand why we don't always feel this connection. Our disconnect with this awareness is driven by two things: the survival of the fittest model since the early human history. Our misconception of free will. Let's look at the first factor, the survival of the fittest model. In this physical reality, everything that we are able to sense via seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching is manifested in the way of form under the principle of duality. Since duality is expressed through division, it seems natural that each of us considers ourselves as a separate entity from our environment. In the early history of human evolution, we were driven by the survival of the fittest model, resulting in the feeling of being totally on your own. Feelings of isolation, separation, and abandonment. These feelings generate fear and pain in us. This is how our ego was formed, out of the need for defense and survival. We just looked at the first element that drives our disconnect with the awareness of our interconnection. Let's look at the second factor, which is our misconception of free will. Besides ego, our misconception of free will adds another layer to the illusion of separation from oneness. We mistakenly assume free will means separated independence and therefore must diverge from oneness. Free will does not mean that your freedom to choose to act is yours only and is independent of others existing in your reality. This perception of reality, by looking at things from the outside in, often leads to a victimhood mindset. On the contrary, looking at things from the inside out, you are the creator of your reality, which is a manifestation of your conscious and subconscious imagination. In this context, free will takes on a whole new meaning. It's your ability to transcend your circumstances, your current state of being. Your free will to imagine attracts certain people and events in your life, which then forms your reality. In a nutshell, that is the interconnection between you and everything else in your reality. The good news is that we have been becoming more and more aware of the mutual relationship between us humans and the environment, as evident by our recent initiatives in environment protection. However, that awareness still originates from our need for survival. And although that is part of the "we are all connected" belief, that is not all there is to it. On a deeper level, we are all connected even in the sense that my bad thoughts, just thoughts that have not been put into action yet, could have a negative impact on the collective consciousness that is created and shared by each and every one of us. By the same token, my positive thoughts that I send out to the universe with a genuine intention could potentially contribute to our collective healing. As a matter of fact, that is how prayers work. But how does it really work? Let's explore how this interconnection really works. First of all, any connection must share a common thread. In this context, our common thread is God. We are an emanation of God. Similar to a ray of sunlight is an emanation of the sun, the source. It's connected to the sun, but it's not the sun. We are all God, universally, and in particular. However, to understand what that means, we need to revisit our understanding of God. God does not exist in the way that most of us want him to. God does not exist as an outside benefactor waiting to attend to our needs, or as someone sitting on his throne judging and punishing our wrongdoings. However, the creative, intelligent quality of the cosmos does exist. It is conscious evolution, and it exists within the very essence of all awareness. Nothing exists outside of this awareness. The energy of collective awareness that pervades and incubates the cosmos in us is what we're calling God. How are we connected to this collective intelligence, and why don't we always feel this divine connection? God, the infinite divine intelligence, took on aloneness and separation as a great experiment for the sake of its own awakening and feeling. In order to be aware of itself, oneness had to divide itself. It's no different than us human beings. The only way for you to know what you look like is to look at yourself in a mirror. The true you. The mirror. And the image of yourself reflected in the mirror are the three things that you need to achieve this self-awareness. You alone are not enough to achieve this awareness. To demonstrate this idea, imagine what it was like before glass mirrors were invented. If knowing what you look like is part of your awareness of yourself, the who am I, then how could our ancestors define their self-awareness without this tool? Before glass mirrors, there were ancient copper or bronze mirrors, but those were very expensive. Therefore, for those that could not afford these expensive tools, their personage was left to a glimpse of water, or a portrait of themselves painted by some artists. The bottom line is that no matter what tool you use, you alone cannot be aware of yourself. You need a tool or another person to project or recreate an image of yourself. Perhaps, this is how the oneness becomes the manyness that makes up of everything we know in our reality today. In other words, oneness's intense desire to be aware of itself is the driving force behind everything that came into existence. This perspective brings a new meaning to I am who I am, that is, God. The collective consciousness was born out of the desire to know and feel itself. Let's circle back to God's experiment of aloneness and separation. To make the experiment a little more dramatically interesting, let's just say we decide to forget that what we see in the mirror is an image of ourselves, that whatever we are doing is being reflected in the mirror. Instead, we mistook what we see, that is the image of ourselves in the mirror, as our reality, our true self. That is essentially what God did. The divine essence contrived to abandon itself, to separate from and divide its own integrity in order to delight creation, and to become truly conscious of itself through the process and experience of separation from its own self. This was the only way it could know itself fully, from without and from within. Okay, so far we understand God's fun little experiment and its intention, but what role does each of us play in the grand scheme of things? In the context of this physical reality, each of us is a unique expression of the divine consciousness, that is the collective consciousness to which we contribute our unique experiences during our lifetimes for the sole purpose of consciousness evolution. Like a musical note, each of us has our own unique frequency, but together we are co-creating a beautiful cosmic symphony. In essence, we are sharing one grand consciousness out of which everything that exists in our physical reality, including our physical bodies, were born. Every living thing in the cosmos is connected through the heart of the collective consciousness. Imagine there is an artery coming from the heart of the divine consciousness into our very being and consciousness on earth. That connection is our link to the universal consciousness. We are feeding our unique experiences into the collective consciousness while receiving the accumulative feedback from the same source. These feedbacks are manifested at the individual level as our emotion, intuition, and collective karma. There is an outgoing movement into creation, which is manifested through our desire toward creation. At the same time, there is a return movement where source consciousness wants to learn about itself. The divine's desire to learn about itself is manifested at the individual level as that yearning and knowing that there is something more to this life than what we were told. That way, the universe can create through us in the way of form without losing itself through its creation. In essence, to do and to be at the same time. We need both, and one of our lessons in life is to learn how to balance both. The organic intermingling of data, impressions, and consequences from endless universal experiences is the nature of consciousness evolution. This consciousness evolution is what we would call God. It moves according to its own being. It is intimately aware of all things at all times simply because it is exactly all those things, that is every form of consciousness and every creation there is. It is also directly linked to the formlessness behind all forms, the source. And finally, it entails all the highest principles that have evolved thus far anywhere in the cosmos. Before we end this video, let's sum up what we have learned. Every living thing in the cosmos is connected through the heart of the collective consciousness. This divine intelligence contrived to abandon itself, to separate from and divide its own integrity in order to delight creation, and to become truly conscious of itself through each living thing in the cosmos. Our relationship to this collective consciousness is that of an open system. We are feeding our unique experiences and thoughts into the collective consciousness while receiving the accumulative feedback from the same source manifested as our emotion, intuition, and collective karma. This is the essence of conscious evolution. I hope you've learned something useful from this video. The next time you send your thoughts into the universe, ask yourself this question: what quality am I contributing to the collective consciousness, and what is my intention? Because your thoughts matter.